The series opens with Luke Cage's release from prison. He then goes to a drug lab where heroin named Luke Cage is being manufactured. Luke enters the lab, fights the people inside, and takes them out. The next day, we see him at a barber shop talking to Bobby. From their conversation, we learn that the barber shop might be closed due to insurance money issues. Bobby offers Luke to use his fame to raise money through a website called Luke Cage, which would allow people to follow Luke's movements as he takes down criminals. However, Luke is not interested in this idea because he does not want to fight crime for money. Elsewhere, we see Claire with Misty, who lost her arm while defending Claire one day. Misty is in a bad state, especially after leaving the police force. Claire is giving her moral support and encouragement. Later, Misty goes to meet Luke. He tells her that a dangerous drug called Luke Cage has spread through the city and asks her to return to work to help him track down the person responsible, but she refuses and leaves. When she returns home, she starts looking at her police badge and begins reconsidering her return to work. Later, Luke and Claire are at a restaurant. From their conversation, we learn that they got married some time ago. Afterward, they return home. Luke hears police sirens and goes to see what is happening. By coincidence, he meets a man named Sugar, who is one of Stokes' men but is now working for Mariah and Shades. Luke asks him about Mariah. Sugar tells him that Mariah and Shades have been working legally for a long time and also promises to keep an eye on them. Meanwhile, Shades and Mariah are sitting in a restaurant with a man named Piranha, who is an investor and helps launder their money. He suggests they buy shares in a plastic company owned by a man named Mark, and this investment will allow them to make more money. Mariah likes the idea and decides to agree to it. To execute this, she goes to the nightclub and talks to a girl named Billy, asking her to seduce the plastic company's manager so they can blackmail and manipulate him into buying his company for a small amount. While Mariah is there, the company's manager, Mark, is also present. Billy goes to him and starts trying to seduce him. Later, 3 people arrive at the nightclub: Nigel, Cockroach, and Arturo, gang leaders who come to ask Mariah for work. They want Mariah to give them weapons, and in return, they will give her money. This money will later help her buy the plastic company from Mark. She listens to their offers and decides to think about it. Luke then arrives at the scene and starts talking to Mariah and the gang leaders. He tells them that if they continue selling drugs in the city, he will take them all down. Mariah tells him that his wife came to the nightclub to watch them and that she has captured her. Luke notices that there are 2 people with his wife, and Mariah warns him that if he does anything to them, they will harm his wife. Luke gets angry but leaves with his wife. He tells her to stay away from his work because he does not want her to be in danger. Later, we see a man named Bushmaster talking with his personal assistant. We discover that Bushmaster was once a member of Nigel's gang. We also learn that he has gained superpowers similar to Luke Cage, which is why he wants to overthrow Nigel and form his own gang. His goal is to eliminate Luke and become the sole ruler of the city. On the same day, Bushmaster begins his mission and goes to where Nigel is located. Nigel is surprised to see Bushmaster because he knows him, but he had disappeared and no one knew anything about him. Bushmaster tells Nigel that he made a big mistake by aligning himself with Mariah and that he must die because of it. Suddenly, he attacks Nigel and kills him. Nigel's men start shooting at Bushmaster, but he is unaffected and easily defeats them. He tells them that he is now the leader of the gang and that they must join him due to his superpowers. On the other hand, Luke gets a call from Sugar. He tells him that Arturo will receive a drug shipment from the port, and he is the person responsible for making and selling drugs. Luke decides to go and get rid of Arturo. Sugar calls Arturo and tells him that Luke will come to him. Thus, we discover that this is an ambush to trap Luke and get rid of him. Luke arrives at the port and finds a truck that is supposed to carry the drug shipment. He enters the truck, but suddenly we see Arturo arriving and blowing up the entire truck. He felt happy and thought that he was able to kill Luke, but he was shocked when he saw Luke get out of the truck and did not die. So he takes the weapon that Diamondback made in the first season of the series about eliminating people with superpowers and shoots him. But Luke was strong and nothing happened to him, as we discover that when Dr. Albert treated him in the first season, he became resistant to these gunshots. Luke beats him up and takes him to the police station and reports him to Captain Ridenhour. There was also Misty, who decided to return to work, which made Luke happy. Luke leaves and goes to Mariah to tell them that the bullets that were designed to kill him no longer affect him. He also tells them that he caught Arturo to the police, with the drugs and warned them that if they deal drugs again, he will come to get rid of them. On the other hand, we see Bushmaster in his house removing the bullets from his body, and then he walks around the Jamaican neighborhood, which is his neighborhood because he has Jamaican roots. He goes to a restaurant in the neighborhood and meets one of his relatives. He talks to him, and we discover that the superpower he has is due to a type of magic that they do on certain flowers and plants. He asks his relative to bring him these flowers and plants to develop his superpower. The man told him that he would find what he needed in a store owned by a girl named Tilda, who has a store specializing in these things. Without wasting time, he went to the store and bought everything he needed. After returning home, he started doing this magic, and we noticed that all the scars on his body have disappeared. On the other hand, we see Luke with his wife, and he told her that Arturo had shot him, but he was not affected by that. His wife confirmed to him that his superpowers increased after Dr. Albert treated him. The next day, Luke goes to a place and trains, and there were journalists filming. Luke started doing these activities because he needed money. After that, he goes to the barber shop. There, Pastor James, who is Luke and Diamondback's father, came to him. James asked to talk to him because he wanted to resolve all the old differences that happened between them, but Luke refused, which made James leave. Misty was investigating Arturo, but Arturo's private lawyer comes and tells her that his client is innocent and will be released on bail. Misty gets angry and calls Luke to tell him. He realizes that Mariah and Shades will never work with Arturo again. He also realizes that if he wants to bring them down, he has to bring down the Jamaican gang or Cockroach's gang, so he decides to look for Cockroach. He starts his search mission and starts asking criminals in the city until he manages to get his home address. He goes to his house, but only finds his wife and son, who didn't tell Luke where he is. There was an old woman who is Cockroach's neighbor, who told Luke about the nightclub where Cockroach is, and she also told him that if he returns home, she will inform him about it. Luke heads to the nightclub and manages to reach Cockroach, but before he can talk to him, Cockroach manages to shoot him with a powerful weapon. With that, Cockroach manages to escape. Luke returns home to be treated by his wife, who tells him that he needs to resolve his dispute with his father, but Luke gets upset and leaves the house. Then, Luke gets a call from the old woman, telling him that Cockroach has returned home, so he goes straight there and starts beating him. On the other hand, we see Mariah sitting with her lawyer Patty. Patty tells her that she was able to find out where her daughter was, that Mariah had hidden from everyone. She advises her to rebuild her relationship with her daughter because this will help her get back into politics, because she still wants to get back into this field. She actually agrees to that and goes to her daughter, who is in her own store, and we discover that her daughter is Tilda, but they haven't been close to each other for years. Mariah asks her to give her a chance to make up for all the past years. Her daughter tells her that she will think about it. Shades goes to Arturo and asks him for the value of the weapon he and Mariah sold to him, but Arturo refuses, arguing that the weapon was meant to kill Luke Cage, but that didn't happen. Arturo continues to mock Shades and his wife, Mariah, prompting Shades and his assistant to kill Arturo and all his men, and they leave the place as if nothing happened. Afterward, Shades goes to Mariah and informs her of the murder of Arturo and his men. Mariah is angry because Arturo was their only hope of getting the money needed to buy the company mark and work legally. However, Shades tells her that he managed to contact someone named Bushmaster, the leader of the Jamaican gang that replaced Nigel. He informs her that Bushmaster intends to buy a large quantity of weapons and pay a significant amount for it. Mariah feels relieved and decides to meet with Bushmaster and make a deal with him. On the same day, Mariah and Shades go about their usual routine when Tilda arrives, and tells Mariah that she has decided to give her a chance as she had requested. Mariah is delighted and introduces Tilda to Shades, who seems surprised because no one knew that Mariah had a daughter. However, this didn't matter much to Shades. What mattered was that Mariah asked him to leave so she could sit with her daughter, which annoys him and makes him feel that Tilda is starting to take his place. But in the end, he leaves without doing anything. Meanwhile, we see Luke still in Cockroach's house, and Cockroach is severely injured due to Luke losing his temper and continuing to beat him. Claire arrives at that moment and examines Cockroach, discovering that he is suffering from a concussion. Of course, Claire scolds Luke for what he did, and begins to feel that Luke has changed a lot. After a while, an ambulance arrives and takes Cockroach, and Misty also arrives, surprised by what Luke did and realizing that it was a big mistake. She asks Luke to leave, but he asks her to let him go to start searching for Nigel and the Jamaican gang, as he wants to prove that Mariah and Shades intend to sell weapons to them to bring them down eventually. Luke heads to the Jamaican neighborhood and goes to a restaurant there, starting to ask those present about Nigel and the Jamaican gang, but no one tells him anything. A young man from the Jamaican gang notices Luke, leaves the place to inform Bushmaster. Luke notices the young man and starts chasing him. At the same time, elsewhere, we see Bushmaster meeting with Shades and asking him about Nigel. Shades tells him that he killed him, and not only that, but gives him his head as proof. He also tells him that he wants to adjust the value of the weapon deal between them. Bushmaster agrees, feeling fear, and they agree on a new price, and then Shades leaves. Afterward, we see Luke arriving at the Jamaican gang's headquarters, and Bushmaster arrives as well. At that moment, Luke asks about Nigel, and Bushmaster tells him that Nigel is no longer around and that he is currently the new leader. Luke asks him not to buy any more weapons from Mariah, not to interfere in the city that Luke protects, and not to come near it. Of course, Bushmaster didn't like this talk and ordered his men to beat Luke. Indeed, they continue to attack Luke, but he manages to fend them all off. It gets to the point where one of them throws a grenade at Luke, but he catches it and simply destroys it, then leaves the place afterward. Later, we see Bushmaster in his house, performing the magic rituals that enhance his strength. After that, he plays a video he had recorded of Luke at the headquarters and begins planning how to defeat him. It's clear that Bushmaster will not be an easy enemy for Luke at all. We now move to Maria, where we see her organizing a very large party attended by Tilda and also Mark, the owner of the plastics company. During the party, Maria begins announcing a new center she wants to open to support single mothers, providing them with assistance and help. Maria admits that she had raised her daughter, Tilda, on her own, and she shares the story with everyone to introduce them to her daughter and encourage them to donate to her center. However, Tilda feels upset because she sees her mother exploiting their relationship to promote her project. After the party ends, Maria sits down with Mark and also brings in the girl named Billy, whom I mentioned earlier that Maria had asked to get close to Mark to gather secrets that could expose him. Now, Billy comes and informs Mark that she had been working for Maria and that she managed to gather many scandals that incriminate him. Mark, filled with anger, asks Maria why she did this. She responds that she did it to force him to sell the plastics company to her, and she threatens to expose him if he doesn't sell the company. Mark agrees, frustrated, and leaves. After that, we see Billy going to meet with Bushmaster's assistant, and we learn that she is actually working for him. Billy tells Bushmaster's assistant that Maria plans to use the weapons money to buy a famous plastics company, and will make a lot of money from it. The assistant is pleased, but we don't yet know what he plans to do with this information. As for Maria, Shades comes to her with the weapons money he got from Bushmaster, and she feels very happy because now she can buy Mark's company. On the other hand, we see Claire going to meet James, Luke's father, without telling him that she is Luke's girlfriend. She begins talking to him and feels through their conversation that he is a kind man who genuinely loves Luke, but Luke is unjust to him. Later that night, when Claire meets Luke, she tells him that she went to see his father and talked to him, and she asks him to treat his father better. But this angers Luke, as he feels that Claire is trying to control him. Luke becomes enraged and loses his temper, as he did before, and completely destroys Claire's house. Claire feels deeply saddened and scared of Luke, and she asks him for a separation. Luke apologizes to her for losing his temper, but Claire refuses to accept any apology from him. Luke then leaves her house feeling upset and wanders the streets to try and calm himself down, but unfortunately, that doesn't happen. Suddenly, Luke is struck with a powerful blow and is thrown to the ground. Then, he sees Bushmaster in front of him. Bushmaster tells Luke that this city is now his, and that Luke should not roam it freely. Luke gets angry and tries to hit Bushmaster, but Bushmaster is very strong and fast, and he keeps hitting Luke without giving him a chance to respond. In the end, Luke collapses unconscious, while everyone around watches in disbelief at what they are seeing. There is also a cameraman named D, who is filming everything that's happening. After Bushmaster teaches Luke a harsh lesson in front of everyone, he calmly walks away from the scene. After some time, Luke finally regains consciousness and can't believe everything that has happened to him. He takes himself and heads to Pop's shop, trying to reach out to Claire, but she doesn't respond at all. Meanwhile, Luke's video spreads everywhere, and people are literally watching it everywhere, whether at the precinct with Misty or with Mariah. We see Mariah sitting with Piranha and Shades, and from their conversation, we learn that Piranha has bought Mark Higgins' share in the plastics company. This share and nearly all the financial assets, including the casino, are now under his control. This makes Shades a bit uneasy, sensing that Piranha is playing Mariah, but he keeps this feeling to himself and doesn't do anything for the time being. Piranha leaves, and Shades sits with Mariah, confiding in her that he feels Piranha is up to something. Shades also suspects that Bushmaster has come to town to get revenge on Mariah, not Luke, and that he was merely fighting Luke to get him out of his way to reach Mariah. At that moment, Mariah becomes tense and tells Shades that her grandfather and Bushmaster's grandfather were partners, but they had some issues, and she doesn't believe Bushmaster is here to get revenge on her because of that. At this point, Shades feels reassured and leaves Mariah to handle some important business, but he leaves his assistant, Comanche, to look after her. The strange thing is that as soon as Shades leaves, Comanche approaches Mariah, trying to pry information from her about the deal with Mark, but Mariah doesn't trust Comanche and doesn't tell him anything. You should remember Comanche for later because his role will be very important. On the same night, Bushmaster arrives and meets with Mariah and Shades. Bushmaster informs them that he's here to complete the weapons deal with them and wants to take all the weapons they have. They agree after some negotiation. After that, Bushmaster starts talking to Mariah, asking her about her grandfather who built the casino. We understand from their conversation that Bushmaster's grandfather was friends with Mariah's grandfather, and they built the casino together, but Mariah's grandfather kicked Bushmaster's grandfather out of the casino and took what was rightfully his. It seems that Bushmaster came to town specifically to take back the casino and reclaim his grandfather's rights. This doesn't sit well with Mariah, so she kicks Bushmaster out of the place, but he leaves calmly without causing any trouble, although it's clear that he doesn't have good intentions. Meanwhile, Shades asks one of his men to keep an eye on Mariah and follow Bushmaster to keep track of him and try to stop him in any way possible. While Shades is tracking Bushmaster, he realizes he hasn't seen Comanche in the casino, so he calls him, but he doesn't answer. Shades then suspects that Comanche is hiding something. At this time, we see Comanche going to meet Detective Ridenhour, and through their conversation, we learn that Comanche was released from prison specifically to spy on Shades and Mariah and set them up. Comanche provides Ridenhour with the latest updates as usual, and then leaves. On the other hand, we see that Luke is feeling a bit better after the beating he took from Bushmaster, so he goes to Misty and tells her they need to start tracking down Bushmaster. The first thing they do is head to Bushmaster's base that Luke visited before, but they find no one there because Bushmaster and his men have moved their location. As they search the place, they find a bag from Tilda's shop, the same bag in which Bushmaster brought the plants that enhance his strength. Luke takes a picture of the bag. Luke and Misty continue searching the place until they find a headless body, Nigel's body, which Bushmaster had killed. Upon seeing the body, both of them are horrified and realize that Bushmaster is insane and not to be taken lightly. They call the city's police to come and see the disaster. When the police arrive, they are accompanied by an officer who is a friend of Misty's. The officer informs Misty and Luke that Bushmaster was an old member of the Jamaican gang and had been missing for a while, but now he's back, and it looks like he wants to become the gang's leader and literally the king of the city. The officer also tells Misty that the owner of the warehouse where Bushmaster had his base is someone named Shaw, who is currently imprisoned. Misty decides to go meet Shaw in prison. When Misty meets Shaw, she asks him why Bushmaster has returned to the city now. Shaw explains that Bushmaster and his family have old claims against some powerful people in the city, and that's why Bushmaster has returned to reclaim his rights. We leave Misty now and switch to Luke, where we see him going to Tilda's shop and asking her about Bushmaster. She gives him some information, and Luke thanks her, asking her to inform him if Bushmaster returns to the shop. Tilda agrees, and it seems that Luke is a bit taken with her. And don't forget, Tilda is Mariah's daughter, but Luke doesn't know this yet. After leaving the shop, Luke goes to Pop's shop, where he meets his friend Bobby Fish. Bobby tells him that he has decided to leave the city and go live with his daughter, whom he had left years ago and had a falling out with. but they have reconciled now, and he's going to live with her. Luke feels sad that Bobby is leaving him, but he's happy that Bobby will be reunited with his daughter. They bid each other a heartfelt farewell, and Bobby leaves. After some time, a police officer arrives at the store and hands Luke a subpoena to attend a court session. Luke takes the subpoena and finds out that he is required to attend a court hearing regarding a case filed against him by Cockroach. Cockroach has filed a lawsuit against Luke for assault. Both Cockroach and his lawyer, as well as Luke and his lawyer, attend the hearing. Luke's lawyer is someone we're quite familiar with, none other than Foggy from the Daredevil series. Foggy starts negotiating with Cockroach's lawyer and manages to reach an agreement. Later, Foggy informs Luke about the agreement, which states that Cockroach is asking for $100,000 in exchange for dropping the case. Luke agrees, but his problem lies in figuring out how to raise the required amount. Luke decides to take action and begins searching for a solution. Meanwhile, we see Misty at a clinic, where a doctor is fitting her with a prosthetic arm. At the same time, we learn that Danny Rand, also known as Iron Fist, a very powerful superhero, has donated the new arm to Misty. Afterward, Misty goes to meet Luke, who informs her that Cockroach has filed a lawsuit against him and is demanding $100,000 to drop the case. Misty suggests that she tries to pressure Cockroach into dropping the case without paying the money, and then she leaves. Luke contacts Foggy again, and Foggy tells him that he has a great offer that could earn him more than $100,000. Luke agrees and goes to meet Foggy, who takes him to Piranha's headquarters. Piranha informs them that he has acquired a major company, specifically referring to Mark Higgins' company. He tells them that he is organizing a big party to celebrate and wants Luke to attend the event for $150,000. Luke agrees, even though he doesn't know much about Piranha. That same night, Luke goes to the party. Meanwhile, we switch to Mariah, who is with her daughter, Tilda. Mariah tells Tilda that she plans to open a new center and wants her to be the manager. Tilda is surprised and doesn't make a decision at the moment. Later, two detectives arrive at the location and ask Mariah about Mark Higgins, the president of the plastic company, as he has gone missing. Mariah becomes anxious and tells the detectives that she knows nothing about him. Afterward, Mariah goes to the casino and meets with Shades, asking him about Mark, as he is also missing. Shades is surprised and tells her that he doesn't know where Mark is, then leaves to meet with Comanche. Comanche is informed that one of his men, named Ray, has also gone missing, and he is asked to look for him. At night, Comanche meets with the chief detective, who always provides information, and asks him if he knows anything about Ray, whether he was arrested or anything else. The chief detective denies knowing anything. Meanwhile, Shades attends Piranha's party and meets Luke there. Shades mocks Luke for coming to perform at the party, but what happens next is more important. Suddenly, members of Bushmaster's gang attack the place and start shooting. Luke and Shades try to fend them off. In the midst of the chaos, two of the gang members kidnap Piranha and flee. Luke chases after them and manages to stop them with difficulty, rescuing Piranha. Luke asks Piranha why Bushmaster wants him, but Piranha replies that he doesn't even know who Bushmaster is. Luke is puzzled, but decides to stay with Piranha to learn more about Bushmaster's intentions and to earn more money by protecting him. We then return to Mariah, where her daughter Tilda confronts her and demands to know what she did to Mark. In exchange, Tilda agrees to become the center's manager. Mariah reveals that she blackmailed Mark into selling his stake in the plastic company, but she did not harm him in any way and had nothing to do with his disappearance. Tilda asks how Mariah got the money to pay for Mark's stake, and Mariah bluntly admits that she and her family have been trafficking weapons for a long time. Tilda is shocked to learn this truth and leaves. At night, Maria goes to open her center, and during the opening, she sees her daughter arriving to attend the event, which makes Maria happy because she realizes that her daughter has decided to stay with her. Maria prepares to open the center's doors to start the celebration, but her joy is short-lived as she is shocked by an explosion in her face and all the attendees, where they find severed heads placed on something resembling spears. At that moment, it wasn't known whose heads those were, but it is later revealed that Bushmaster is responsible for this act. Later, we see Misty heading to Cockroach's house to search it, hoping to find something that would make him drop the case against Luke. The surprise is that Misty finds Cockroach slaughtered with his head missing, and of course, it's believed that Bushmaster is the one who did it. Now, we return to Luke, who takes Piranha and tries to escape while being chased by Bushmaster's men. Eventually, they manage to catch up to Luke, and they engage in a fight, but he manages to defeat them and continues to escape with Piranha until they reach an old theater. Luke and Piranha hide in the theater to figure out a plan for what they will do next. Piranha is injured, so Luke tries to treat him and starts questioning him about why Bushmaster's men are chasing him. Piranha explains that he controls all of Maria and Shade's money, and that anyone who wants to control them must control him. That's why Bushmaster wants to kidnap Piranha to take over all of Maria and Shade's assets. After Luke learns all of this, he contacts Misty and tells her that when things calm down, he will leave the theater and bring Piranha to her so she can protect him and get all the information needed to arrest Shades, Maria, and also Bushmaster. When Luke finishes the call and goes to find Piranha, he discovers that Bushmaster's men have come and abducted him. Luke starts running after them and fights with them, eventually managing to defeat all of them and retrieve Piranha, then escaping with him once again. At this moment, Luke decides to hide Piranha by any means necessary, so he takes Piranha and goes to his father, James, at the church. Finally, Luke reconciles with his father and asks him to hide Piranha. James agrees. Afterward, Luke contacts Bushmaster and tells him that he knows his plan and is certain that Bushmaster wants Piranha. Luke and Bushmaster agree to meet at a specific location and fight, with the winner taking Piranha. Bushmaster agrees and heads to meet Luke on a bridge. Without delay, they begin to fight fiercely. The battle is intense and evenly matched until Luke finally manages to hit Bushmaster and injures him. It seems Luke is about to finish him off, but at that moment, Bushmaster throws a strange powder-like substance at Luke, causing him to become paralyzed and unable to move. Bushmaster then strikes Luke and throws him off the bridge into the water, and it remains unknown whether Luke will survive this. Meanwhile, Mariah has been arrested after the heads were found in her center. Misty wants to interrogate her, but the chief of detectives refuses and takes over the interrogation himself. The chief of detectives informs Mariah that the heads found at her center belong to Mark, Ray, and also Cockroach. He asks her about her connection to these three and whether Bushmaster is responsible for all this, or if she is. Despite Mariah being certain that Bushmaster is behind it, she denies knowing anything about it and denies any involvement, leaving the police station as if she is not involved. This situation greatly angers Misty, who feels that the police are constrained and unable to assert control over criminals like Mariah and others. Therefore, Misty decides to resign to the chief of detectives because she no longer believes that the police will achieve justice in the city. Away from the issue of achieving justice in the city, we continue with Mariah, who now goes to meet Shades. She informs him that Bushmaster wants to kidnap Piranha to seize all of her assets. Mariah asks Shades to go out and find Luke to get Piranha from him by any means possible. Shades agrees, and he and Comanche set out to search for Luke. However, they are unable to find anything, so they return to Mariah, where Shades admits his failure in the mission. They now wait to see what Luke will do, and whether he will be able to save Piranha. Shades then learns that he needs to attack Bushmaster's relative's restaurant, which he knows about from tracking Bushmaster, in an attempt to kidnap one of Bushmaster's relatives to force Bushmaster to stay away from Mariah. Mariah agrees to this plan and feels somewhat relieved. We return to Luke, who is still in the water, unconscious and near death. Despite this, he continues to remember his parents and all his cherished memories, which helps him regain consciousness. When Luke emerges from the water, the first thing he does is head to his father James at the church, only to find that Piranha has left. Luke becomes furious because he knows Bushmaster will definitely kill Piranha if he gets to him, so he leaves the church and sets out to search for Piranha everywhere. Misty also comes and decides to help him in his search, even though she is no longer a police officer. She has decided to assist him at this time. Meanwhile, Bushmaster forces Piranha to transfer all his money and Mariah's assets, and Piranha reluctantly agrees, terrified. After some time, Luke and Misty arrive at Bushmaster's hideout, but they find neither Bushmaster nor Piranha, only Bushmaster's men. Luke and Misty manage to fight off Bushmaster's men and succeed in defeating them after a fierce battle. They then continue searching the place in hopes of finding Piranha, eventually discovering only a part of him, his head. Yes, my friend, Bushmaster is insane and has butchered Piranha as usual after taking all of Mariah's and Shade's assets. Luke, especially, feels that he has failed to protect Piranha. The police arrive at the scene to assess the situation, while Luke continues to search for Bushmaster, who continues to kill people. On the other hand, the chief of detectives goes to meet Mariah and talks to her, informing her that Bushmaster has killed Piranha and might kill more, so she needs to cooperate to help catch him. Mariah refuses to cooperate, and the chief of detectives leaves angrily. Mariah then checks her accounts and finds that all her money has been transferred to Bushmaster, who now owns everything while she has nothing left. Despite this, Mariah decides to escape with her daughter and Shades. Meanwhile, we see Shades with Comanche, where it appears that Shades has begun to suspect that Comanche is collaborating with the police.